I have this Go case just about ready to approve, certainly to discuss. This is the original ClinCheck from the Invisalign GO software. The software is designed to level the incisal edges, so that's why we see a lot of anterior extrusion. At the same time, when looking at the lower arch, the lower anterior are being uncrowded and some IPR, which doesn't surprise me, and then intruded as well, to only finish with a nearly the same overjet as what we started with. I mean, the patient's not completely end-to-end, but with the IPR, you would think this would be an improvement, and it is some. We can see some interocclusal space, I should say, but the upper arch doesn't, and these upper anterior teeth don't necessarily need to extrude. And if we were to look at the patient photographs, we can certainly confirm that. In addition, if we wanted these extrusions to happen most predictably, we would want retention attachments on the premolars. I did request to add those. You can see some of the comments that I made here. So these are optimized retention attachments. Rectangles can work as well. And so these are important because the undercuts here are really what the case needs for the aligner to grip here. And when that happens, then the aligner is better engaged with the entire arch and then engages with the other attachments. So if we still wanted extrusion, we would most predictably get it if we have retention attachments. Even without the extrusion, if we want any of the other movements like rotating the canines or moving this lateral forward, that is just going to happen most predictably if the aligner is well engaged with the arch. And also, patients tend to find it more comfortable, to be honest, because the aligner is really well adapted to their teeth and not feeling loose at any time. Retention attachments are absolutely critical if we want any intrusion to happen, because intrusion is a movement that pushes against bone, and the undercuts of the teeth themselves, especially some of these shorter mandibular teeth, are not enough for the aligner to really grip and put in orthodontic force. Now, I don't like having to do IPR all the way through the premolars. That's not the outcome that we would really want. And so let's look at how and why things are happening. So I would want to do as much arch expansion as we can. So let's look a little bit over to the right side. And that's looking like it's expanding some, okay? And then looking at the left side, this tooth in particular, this upper canine really retracts in, and that's not really helpful for the case. It looks like the canine's in a good position. If anything, we might want to tip the crown out so it's more vertical, and then that can provide us more space. So this is where using the 3D controls, I think, can be helpful. Now that we've added the retention attachments that we want and the bite ramps that can prevent posterior open bite. So I'm just going to go ahead and just get rid of this IPR. From here, the overjet that we have is definitely improved, and far less attachments on the upper arch and far less extrusion. Now, intrusion is a movement that lags behind, so if we want to see the final finish like this, where the canines are above the centrals, I highly recommend adding a little bit more on the ClinCheck. If we want 1.2-ish, then we should add in a 1.5. Studies have shown that, these studies vary as to how much retention was added to the case, but we typically don't see 100% of intrusion expressed clinically as what we see on the ClinCheck. So let's do this canine movement where let's not tip that lingual. In fact, let's tip it a little bit buccal, and then we can move this tooth a little bit buccal so that it fits better within the arch. Now from there, once that happens, this premolar can then do more of that arch expansion, and see how those IPR numbers start to come down. Let's increase the arch expansion as much as we can, all the way through, just adding just a little bit. And the way that I'm choosing to move the teeth is crown, I say tipping, but orthodontically it's crown torque, because this is far easier for the aligner to do, and in our adult patients typically pushes the teeth more in the vertical direction of where we need them to go, rather than this type of translation. So then, oops, I got a interference of a contact there. Went that a little bit too far for where the molar is. Okay, and then if we took this a little bit further, that uprights the tooth. We took this a little bit further, that uprights the tooth. And see again how those IPR numbers are starting to come down while still having the same or very similar final overjet. This looks far easier. Let's take the occlusion off now, and then see if the teeth are still straight. Since I've done those canine movements, these aren't in the most perfect arch form, and we have enough leeway that I think we can do some smaller numbers of IPR here. And what I'm looking for is some definite space between the lingual of the upper tooth and the buccal of the lower tooth, and that might be easier seen if we were to take the attachments off. Now this is not going to be as large clinically as what we see on the ClinCheck, because the intrusion isn't going to be as expressed, but we do want to provide space, especially when the patient already had traumatic occlusion and a fair amount of damage, right? So we want to relieve that damage, and this looks like a fairly reasonable amount of IPR to do while keeping the final outcome that we're looking for. And we think of why do we need to do so much IPR? Well, it's from the canine position here, it looks like this patient is class 3 on the left-hand side, even though they look kind of class 1 on the right-hand side. Let's put these attachments back on. And then my last and final things are looking at what types of movements are happening. So if I click here, I can look at these movement tables. And this rotation attachment, we know that when we hover over it, it'll tell you rotation attachment. This is there for only 3 degrees of rotation. So what if I were to press 0 and enter? The case doesn't look that much different. And then the great thing is I can now get rid of that attachment, and I like retention attachments. I will add attachments. They provide really good retention and control. But if we can go without them, then that just enhances the patient experience. So see how this looks with less rotation. I actually think it looks a little bit better. And that's because the software will rotate the teeth into an arch form, but it may not be exactly what we need, and that's where our analysis is really key. Let's take a look at this, and just for curiosity, what if we didn't rotate? Not terrible, not awesome, but if I just did a little bit of movement like this, looks like it blends in with the arch form. So I think that can work. And then we're also increasing the predictability of the buccolingual and crowding correction here by just eliminating and reducing how many different directions of movement are being planned in. So this ClinCheck I think looks beautiful. Let me know if you have any other questions, then we'll submit this. Everything we do with the CAD designers does get saved and then delivered right back. We just have to wait a day. Thanks so much.